اللعين الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله اللهم لعنهم جميعا ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. Firstly, I'd like to wish condolences to all the believers, especially to our master Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mehdi, in these days where we commemorate the martyrdom of the sixth Imam, Al-Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammed al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayh. We are indebted to Ja'far ibn Muhammad, salawatullahi alayh. When I say we, I'm talking about the Shia to begin with, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, insha'Allah. We are of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, alayhim as-salam. And we are truly indebted. Why? If you take a look at our narrations, almost half, if not more than half, of our narrations are narrated through Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So what we have, what we read from, what we study, our laws, all this is through this window that Allah has given us, this medium, this proxy, which is Ja'far ibn Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamu alayh. But is it limited to us? Even every other Muslim, every school of thought of Islam is indebted. Because if you take a look at Ahmad ibn Hanbal, was the student of who? He was the student of al-Shafi'i. So the madhahib al-arba'a we know, Ahmad ibn Hanbal is one, Hanbal is one. He was a student of al-Shafi'i. And the Shafi'i was the student of Malik. So you have the Hanbali, Shafi'i and the Maliki madhab. And Malik was the student of An-Nu'man, who was Abu Hanifa. And Abu Hanifa was the student of Ja'far ibn Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamu alayh. He says that of all his years in study, Abu Hanifa says, لولا السنتان لهلك النعمان. If it wasn't for the 2 years that I studied, so in those 2 years he studied with Ja'far ibn Muhammad salawatullahi alayh, he said, I would have perished. In other words, I would have had no value that I studied there. Which brings us to the understanding here that all Muslims in general are indebted to Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq salawatullahi alayh. They're all indebted to him. Some took the teachings and followed them as they were. Others took from the teachings and added what they liked and removed what they did not like to come finally with the product that they have. This isn't only with those that follow other sects, even those that dress in scholarly garb and give their own opinions on subjects that are contrary to the teachings of Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in. On these nights, I always like to look at the narrations from the Imams because their teachings are what are important. And besides the fact the Imam was the longest living Imam that actually was martyred. Besides Imam al-Hujjah, who hasn't been martyred, who's lived, may Allah protect him so that he rises and restores justice. The longest one that lived in longevity in age was the sixth Imam. And even though we consider the sixth Imam to be someone that had freedom in teaching the religion, even that freedom was very limited. In one narration where someone's asking about, one of the narrations where someone's asking Imam Al-Sadiq alayhi salam about a hadith with regard to what? To the woman's monthly cycle. He asks him a question. They say the Imam looks right. He looks behind him. He looks left. Then he responds. You think to yourself, what? Why would the Imam take so much care to respond to a fiqh question? Because of the amount of spies that were around that would pick out that the Imam was teaching or giving a ruling that would be contrary to the ruling body. Because they didn't want someone else's opinion that's around. Even with this, he was able to teach. In another case where someone even bought produce from someone selling, Ahsan, thank you. Someone bought produce of another person that was selling a product, and he went to the Imam to sell the Imam in disguise. He wasn't actually selling. He came to ask him about an issue that he had with his wife. He came to ask the Imam in this manner where he's selling something to the Imam. Do you imagine the difficulty at this time? Yet with all this, we were able to get the teachings that we have with us today. So surely we are indebted. Of the narrations of the Imam, and this is always fundamental and paramount for every lecturer and every speaker and everyone that wants to teach Islam, the most important thing to teach them is taqwallah. And in this narration, the Imam salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi says, ittaqullah, ittaqullah, ittaqullah. 3 times he mentions what? Ittaqullah. He mentions taqwa 3 times. Why? Because this is the most important part of your life. Having taqwa. And that's why when you have the sermon, those that pray Salat al-Jam'ah, what's the first thing they hear in the first khutbah? Usikum bitaqwa Allah. They call you for taqwa. Why? What's the importance? Because everything that you do has no value without taqwa. And let's look at this narration so we can understand what the Imam is saying. Now, taqwa is made of 2 parts, but let me explain what he says in this narration, where he says, alaykum, after this, bil wara'. First it's what? Wara'. Alaykum bil wara'. Wara' is what? Abstinence from sin, avoiding sin. He says, alaykum bil wara'. He's commanding people to abstain from sin. If you look at this, this is the biggest problem. You see this person, he sponsors orphans. This person, he prays on time. You see them, they're going to the masjid. How many times you see people, they go into the masjid, they pray, they're always around doing religious things, they're in Muharram, and then he's at some club selling some sticks, or he's on some corner selling something, or, building his house from haram money. And before he does that, he justifies this. I'm selling drugs to kuffar, so it must be permissible. That's what he says. Or he says to himself, I'm stealing from an unbeliever. So it is, you see these people, they do all these rorts, they steal and they lie. And if you actually look at the risalas of the ulama, our fuqaha, and what they say about this, people that do all these kind of things, look at what our scholars say about these things. You'll be shocked about what they say. About how you deal with a non-Islamic government. That you have to abide by this law. Our ulama say even if the non-Islamic government is an oppressive government, you have to abide by the law. You have to. Why? Because if we don't have any order, we don't have any nizam, it becomes chaos. Guess what? You're back in the Middle East. That's not that they're going to send you to the Middle East, but that's the Middle East. There's no order. There's a wasta. Someone shot you, bad luck. We'll give you some money. Forget about it. A little 10-year-old kid's driving a car, runs someone over. So what? Give him blood money. What about the 10-year-old driving the car? It's not a problem. We've got no issue with that. Because that's how the Middle East is run by wastat, run by connections, and this is the chaos that people live in. And if that's what you wanted, you wouldn't have migrated to a country to get a better life, a better way of living. So when you come and then you start to do all these rorts and steal and thieve, and then you say to yourself that I'm someone that does. That's why the Imam says, alaykum bil wara'. And then he says, وَصِدْقِ الْحَدِيث, and we'll go over this, and honesty in your speech, وَأَدَاءِ الْأَمَانَةِ, and returning the trust. He says, وَعِفَّةِ الْبَطْنِ وَالْفَرْجِ, the modesty of the tummy and the modesty of the private part. He says, تَكُونُ مَعَنَا بِالرَّفِيقِ الْأَعْلَى. And we'll explain what that means. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. In one narration, so we're going to talk about this, where it's narrated عن عمرو بن سعيد ابن هلال, he says to Al-Imam Abu Abdullah Al-Sadiq salawatullah alayh, he says to him, awsini. What does awsini mean? Give me a commandment. You know, when you visit someone, you visit a alim, sometimes you say, can you give me something to take home? Give me something that I must learn, or something that I should follow. And they impart on you knowledge that is essential for your life. So the Imam says to him, Imam Al-Sadiq salawatullah alayh, he says, Usika bi taqwa Allah. What's the first thing? He says, I command you with taqwa Allah. And he mentions what taqwa Allah is. Taqwa Allah wal wara'. See, because generally when we think about taqwa, we think it means religious or pious. But the word taqwa is all about what? It's all about wiqaya. It's all about guarding. That's why when you read the English translation, what does it say? Those who guard from evil. Taqwa means to actually guard from evil, to stay away from evil, to stay away from vice, to stay away from wrong. It's more important than doing good. It's much more important. To abstain from evil is more important. To the point he says, Usika بتقوى الله والورع والاجتهاد, because wara' plus ijtihad equals taqwa. Wara' is guarding from evil. Ijtihad is striving, which means what? Praying, fasting, hajj, and all the furu', all the a'mal, they're your ijtihad. All the rituals are ijtihad. Wara' is the abstinence from sin. And then he says, this is what I've been talking about. The Imam salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi says, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا يَنْفَعُ اجْتِهَادٌ لَا وَرَعَ فِيهِ. لا ينفع. رحت على الحاج, you went to Hajj, أحسنت, بارك الله فيك, تقبل الله. You come back from Hajj, you're stealing, what's the point of your Hajj? You fasted Shahr Ramadan, Allah yajrak. May your fasting be accepted. After Shahr Ramadan, you know, one of the brothers actually told me, and I love to bring this subject up a lot because I always hear this, and I love when these imbeciles that don't know anything about religion like to give their opinion. He said to me, a guy said to me, it's permissible for me to smoke marijuana. You always hear this all the time. And he said, the guy that told me reads majalis. I said, you can get anyone to get up on a mambar. Kids will get up on a mambar and they will urinate on their own clothes. And they'll sing on anything on the mic. It doesn't mean anything. They're not fuqaha. The faqih, the marja' that sits all day in his house, researching and studying to make your life. Did you know how important the marja' is to you? I just want to let you know. If the marja' doesn't study, guess who has to study? You and me. Us. We are ignorant. I'm ignorant. I need an alim to explain the religion to me. I'm ignorant, I'm telling you. The alim is the one that understands. He explains my religion to me. Then some imbecile who wants to have a cone or two tells you that it's permissible. You don't listen to these people. They don't understand religion. Their opinion is not welcome. The Imam is saying this to you. There's no benefit in this majlis you're reading while you're doing haram. There's no benefit. The Imam says, it's not my words. لا ينفع اجتهاد لا ورع فيه. You don't have wara. What's this ijtihad for? Then in another narration, عن الإمام الصادق, for me to reiterate, this hadith I've mentioned so many times on the Mambara. But it's so important to mention this hadith. He says, ترك لقمة حرام أحب إلى الله تعالى من صلاة ألفي ركعة تطوعا. What is this? To refrain from eating a single morsel of haram. Doesn't mean only eating food that's haram. To obtain money that's haram. To get money in a haram way. To abstain, to stop yourself from doing a morsel. What's a morsel? Something very small. And you're earning like, say, $20 with haram, for example. He says to stop, prevent yourself from even like stealing an amount like that is better than what? Is better than praying 2,000 rak'at. That mustahab. So imagine, you get up. How many people can get up and pray 2,000 rak'at? How long would it take you to pray 2,000 rak'at? Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. If you were to pray them consecutively, you're looking at about an 18-hour stretch. It's better for you not to eat a morsel of haram. This is how important it is. In another hadith, عن الإمام الصادق صلوات الله عليه, he says, رد دانق حرام. Okay, when we're talking about, he's talking about a single dirham. To turn away a single, forego a single dirham, he says, of haram. يعدل عند الله 70 حجة مبرورة. If I forego 1 dirham, what is a dirham? It's a silver coin. We calculated it last time. I remember, I don't know if it's Ramadan, the one before. We calculated it at about, it equaled about $8 or something like that. Something, $3, sorry. 3 grams? 3 grams of silver. Who's invested in silver? What's 3 grams of silver? Huh? It was about that. It was around that mark, unless it's changed. Does anyone know? Well, that amount. If you forego that, 3 grams of silver. Can you imagine 3 grams? People throw them out. 3 grams of silver. To forego that, he says, is equal to doing 70 hajjs that are accepted. My hajj that I did by myself, I don't know if it's accepted. But this I know is guaranteed because Imam says 70 hajjs that are accepted for me not to eat something that's haram. It's not about making money. It's not about being rich. This is what people fail to understand. It's not about having flashy cars. It's not about having a portfolio of houses. It's not about being able to travel to every holiday hotspot. It's not about for you vying with your friends if your cardigan's newer than theirs or you belong to the better golf club or the yacht club. What's it about? It's about achieving over there on the other side. Here's nothing. You could die in an instant. Tonight, at the end, we're going to do a fatha for 3 people that died, and they're all in different age groups, all belonging to a family of 1 man. They're related to this 1 man. All 3 of them are related to one and a whole family, so they're linked. But they're all different age groups, just to let you know that death does not discriminate. At any point you could die. May Allah increase your lives, inshallah, in His worship. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this is the first thing. Then the Imam says, Sidq al-Hadith. Sidq al-Hadith, meaning to be truthful when you speak. This is also linked to those that want to teach religion. They need to be truthful what they say. Not be opinionated and give their own opinion when they get up on the mambar. You see some people, they get up on the mambar, or they've got some of them are loose cannons. They just throw them on Facebook. They want to write anything. They say, this alim said this, and honestly, this guy's not even worthy of being chewing gum on the alim of his shoe. And then he wants to give his opinion. That's stuck to the bottom of his shoe. And then he gives his own opinion and says, this is what I think. And this is my opinion. And I don't know how the alim came to this reasoning. You don't know because you don't understand. You don't understand because you're not scholarly. You're not someone that's studied. And this is the problem with these people that attack, and people tend to follow them. You need to be truthful in your speak. You need to know what your position is. Because even, we're talking tonight about Imam Al-Sadiq alayhi salam. In a long hadith, and I don't want to mention, it's a very nice hadith, but it's a long hadith where the Imam is invited with his father, Imam Al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhima, and Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik, who was the Khalif at the time, gets them to, he asks the Imam to fire an arrow at a target. And the Imam's a child, the Imam doesn't want to. But he insists upon him. He insists upon him until the Imam, in the narration says he fires 3 arrows. The first one hits the target, right on the bullseye. The second one splits the first arrow and hits the target. The third one splits the second arrow and it hits the target. This is what he does. This is a sign of God. Then, when he begins to ask him, it's a very long narration, like I said, I just want to get to the point. Just he shows him what they can do. And he asks him questions. Before he asks him, he says to him, as a child, to Imam Al-Sadiq, he says, are you of the scholars of the Shia? And are you of the scholars? And what does the Imam answer? He doesn't say, Ana sahib al-jalala. I am this Ayatullah al-Uzma al-Hajj, and every other title that he can throw in the line. It's what people do. He studies 3 sentences and then he puts out a book and says he's a marja. This is what people are starting to do these days. They give their own opinion. They don't have to say they're a marja. They give their opinion like they're a marja. So the Imam, salawatullahi alayhi, the one who Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says, do not teach them. The ones that carry the message. The ones that the Quran refers to. That if you do not know, ask them. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. This Imam that you're supposed to ask if you don't know, says to Hisham, I am not of the ignorant. He doesn't say, you know who I am? Scholar, you serious? He says, I am not of the ignorant. That's the response that the Imam gives. Firstly, why I need to be truthful? I'll give you 3 quick points. If you're truthful, you don't need a good memory. Why? Because you don't need to remember the lie and who you told the lie to. That's the first benefit of being truthful. The second benefit is everyone hates being lied to. You hate being lied to. Thirdly, is when you lie, Allah Azza wa Jal belies you. His angels belie you. Could you imagine that? That everyone, Allah belies you. He says you are a liar. That is too great. Fourthly is what Amir al-Mu'mineen says, which suffices. He says sufficient that the liar wants to be believed. That's when they ask him about how bad lying is he says it's sufficient that the liar wants to be believed. No one tells you a fishing story and expects you to call them a liar. They expect you to believe them, you know. When they sit there and say, listen, I've got 4 XY GTHOs in my garage, they expect you to believe that they have that. They're not just throwing these lines. They want you to believe that, you know, you're so awesome. They want you to believe this. That they're so awesome, sorry. Then, what I mentioned about lying also, not being truthful, is that lying brings about destruction. The Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says, وَاجْتَنِبُوا الْكَذِبِ وَإِنْ رَأَيْتُمْ فِيهِ النَّجَاةِ فَإِنَّ فِيهِ الْهَلَكَ. He says, abstain or avoid lying, even if you see safety within lying, that you're going to be saved. You know why people lie? To get out of something. Because the Prophet says, in it is destruction. This is where you destroy. A lie can bring you apart. Finally, what Abu Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi says to them on the day of Ashura, he says to them, Wallahi ma ta'ammadtu ما تعمدت كذبا منذ علمت أن الله يمقت عليه أهله. Allah Azza wa Jal hates, is wrathful, is not content with whoever lies. So that's the first thing where he says to be truthful in their speech. The second thing he says is ada'ul amana, after he mentions taqwa. Taqwa was the prelude, we should say, then truthfulness speech, and then fulfilling trust. The thing about fulfilling trust, you need to understand there is no discrimination with fulfilling trust. You have to return the trust at all times. Someone lends you something, you have to return it. Someone says, you say, can I borrow this? And he says, yes. Can you bring it back next week? If you're not going to bring it back next week, don't take it. Because once you take it, you have to return it. If someone says, listen, can I park my car in your garage? I'm going overseas for a year. You can say no. You can say, listen, there's Miller storage, go park it there. The moment you say yes, you have to look after that car. You have to treat it like it's your own car. I know some people don't even treat their own cars right. You have to treat it properly. You have to treat the car in the best way. If you don't want to, what do? Say, no, I can't take the car. I don't want the car. That's all you say. I don't want this car. I don't want this amana, thank you very much. Finally, the third point, he says, وَعَفَّةُ الْبَطْنِ وَالْفَارْجِ. I should not, just because sometimes you see people, they travel to a faraway place. And I will tell you, look, I was looking for halal food, there was no halal food. So I just ate what I wanted. Or people, they don't really care. They're not looking into what they're eating, whether it's permissible or not permissible. Alhamdulillah, most people call me and they worry about the slightest things when it comes to eating. They're very cautious about what they eat. They're very careful about not eating. That's one thing where people are really good at. But when it comes to the other one's an issue. Al-Farj. You wouldn't believe how many people contact me and they say, can I perform a temporary marriage with a girl without her father's permission? A lot of people contact and they'll send this message. This is something that's forbidden. It's not something that's acceptable. But they'll still go out of their way to do it, or they'll try and find a loophole. They'll dig up some fatwa from some graveyard that they could find just to use this. And they'll make something that's not permissible for them. This is what's forbidden. We spoke about this in Shahr Ramadan in more detail. Or even to the point where people will commit, especially in winter, everyone's gone, Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In winter, everyone goes a bit cold, but in summer is where this problem becomes an issue. In summer is where everyone falls down this path. So I need to be fearful of this. Finally, on top of all this, see, let's just take a look at this. Firstly, he says, ittaqullah, ittaqullah, ittaqullah. Firstly, guard from evil, and taqwa in general, 3 times. And then he says, wa alaykum bil wara, to abstain from sin. And then he says, sidq al hadith, be honest in your speech, ada'ul amana, fulfill the trust. And then he says, affat al-batni wal-farj, for you to be careful of committing sin with your modesty. This is what he's talking about, abstaining from sin with regard to what you consume in your belly and what you entertain yourself with the opposite gender. Or even, God forbid, what's in vogue now. But anyway, and both of them, God forbid. What is so important about what I just said is what finishes at the end. You know what? You work for a company and you're an employee. At one point, you want to be one of the what? The people that are up there. You want to be a fellow. You want to be an associate. You want to be, one of those that's in this cooperation. You want to be in this company at the top. You want to be a boss. This is what the Imam is saying, the ingredients for you to be a boss in the Day of Judgment. He says, تَكُونُ مَعَنَا بِالرَّفِيقِ الْأَعْلَى. He says, you will be with us. Not with anyone else, with us. Who is he talking about? He's talking about Muhammad wa al Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi ajma'in. This is what he's talking about. You will be with us on the Day of Judgment. Not just in paradise. You're not, if your view is just, I want to get into paradise, you're not looking at anything. You want to be with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. You know, with the Imam alayhim salam, this is what you need to strive for. You shouldn't settle for the less. You shouldn't settle for whether, don't roll the dice for the Day of Judgment. Know what you're heading for. Know in what direction you're moving. Especially when it comes to the actions and what the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam said in his last words before Allah Azza wa Jal took him back into his mercy. He said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, as-salat, as-salat, as-salat. He mentioned prayers 3 times. And Imam Al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi said something in his last moments. Like every other member of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, they were either killed, as in the way of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, in the way of Fatima salawatullahi wa salamu alayha, in the way of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or they were poisoned, like Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the remaining Imams. The last of the Imams that was buried in Baqiyah, as we mentioned, Baqiyah, that still hasn't been rebuilt and the graves are what they were, is this Imam. The 6th Imam, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammed Al-Sadiq salawatullah alayhi. And he was poisoned by Al-Mansur Al-Abbasi. He's the one that sent poison and had him suffer for the last moments of his life. But the last words he gave are what are essential. See, here the Imam doesn't talk about those that don't pray. If he spoke about those that don't pray, we understand their position and their status, where they end up. Those that don't pray are the same ruling as an unbeliever. They have the same ruling. But he talks about those that take their prayers lightly. You know, when you hear someone says, I didn't have time to pray at work, I left my prayer, I pray at qada, I was nijis at work. You know you're going to get nijis. Do you know you get nijis at work? Take clothes with you to work. You know you're going to get nijis because this is your prayer. This is more important than anything else. Don't forget about, I need to close this job. Whether the job is closed or open, you need to close your account with God. The Imam says on his deathbed, Ruhi al-Fida, La shafa'a. And this is, you hear words like this is what I'm waiting for. What do you think I'm waiting for? My lousy actions? And to honestly, who here is relying on the Amen? Who's relying on the Amen? Who here is relying on the actions they've done? The Imam says, La shafa'a on his deathbed. لمن استخف بصلاته. Or in another way it's mentioned, شفاعتنا لا تنال من استخف بصلاته. Our intercession, Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim, does not reach the one that takes their prayers lightly. Doesn't give regard to their prayer. In fact, on the day of Ashura, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam didn't forego his prayers. He didn't say this is a time for us to fight, put your prayers aside. When the prayer time came, the adhan was recited and the Imam prayed. That they had to pray even though they knew from moments that they will all leave this earth. They will all be martyrs in the way of God. But they knew they had to close their account with God. They knew that they had to do what was right in order that they meet their Lord purified. So in these last moments, even they upheld their prayers. And in Shahr Ramadan al-Mubarak, when we talk about Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, it was in these prayers that he was struck while he was turning to his Creator, while he was praying to his Creator. In these moments, because of the importance of the prayer, and because they knew how important the prayer was to Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, they knew this was the opportune moment to attack him. This was the opportune moment to kill him. And thus it was with every Imam. Everyone that taught us the religion was someone that would pray. Even when you hear about the prophets, one after the other in the Quran, that they would pray. So this last words that the Imam gave to us was for that reason. Anyway, the people that have passed into God's mercy that I mentioned, and inshallah, this gathering and is rewarded to them. There's three people of three age groups. One is a male, a middle-aged male. One is a teenage boy, and one is the mother of this teenage boy, who is also the auntie of that male that died. Three different age groups. In one moment, their lives are taken. This shows you that death doesn't discriminate. Allah Azza wa Jal will take our lives from us at any point. So I need to reflect over everything that I am doing in my life right now as we gather in this moment, and that my time could expire at any moment. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive us our transgression. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to not take us from this world until He is pleased with us. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to have mercy upon our deceased, especially the deceased that will be mentioned for the Fatiha. And we ask Allah to hasten the reappearance of our master Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi, arwahuna fidah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma qul حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا ولا أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات ولا أرواح موتانا وموتاكم ولا روح قاسم سيمي كمال وعلي حاتم كمال وأسماء عبد الأمير كمال. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.